Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I'm Exothermic and the date today is Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. That means it's the 107th day of ranking my favorite video games through each day of the year. Coming in at number 260 is Halo Wars. Halo Wars was one of the most ambitious ideas ever conceived in modern gaming. When Halo Combat Evolved, released nearly a decade prior, it brought high-depth and skill first-person shooters, which had previously been almost exclusively relegated to PC gaming, to consoles. Halo Wars set out to do the same thing, but with the real-time strategy genre. For the first time on these rankings, I get to say something extraordinarily ambitious actually, mostly, achieved all of its goals. I recorded with the PC port on Steam, but since this game was designed for controllers and I originally played the game on Xbox 360, I went against my instincts and played this RTS with a controller. Finer unit control is a little tough with the cursor controls, but the pace of the game is a touch slow compared to many PC counterparts to kind of offset that. With detailed microcontrol complaints aside, everything controls great. Units are responsive, pathing normally makes sense, and multitasking isn't as awful as you'd think. You can select individual units with the A button or hold it to create a large circle for selection. The left shoulder button selects your whole army, and right shoulder button just selects units currently on the screen. The directional pad gives you quick controls for the map and cycling through bases and anywhere your units are. The X button is an attack move, and many units have a special ability you can do with the Y button. Right trigger cycles through units in your current selection to choose which ability you want to do. Select buildings, and a radial menu pops up for selections. That's basically all of the controls, and you're ready to go forth and conquer. The game has a campaign and a plethora of multiplayer options. The campaign serves as a prequel to the story for the mainline games, setting up additional conflict between the armies of Earth and the Covenant. Missions are generally broken into three categories: Grand Combat, Installation, and Defensive. Grand Combat missions are what I would describe as normal RTS gameplay. You build up a base, expand your economy, assemble an army, and then go and fight the enemy with it over some objective, usually killing the enemy's base or some other important point. With installation missions, however, you don't have a base to manage, and there's no economy. You've got a group of units, and that's what you get. Manage them properly as you make your way to the main objective to the mission and get the job done with as minimal losses as possible. Defensive missions are my least favorite and can actually be Grand Combat or Installation, but I set them apart as its own kind due to the difference in win condition. Typically, in any RTS game, the goal is to defeat an opponent of some kind, and you can get pretty creative with it. In defensive missions, such as the fourth mission of the campaign, you have to hold down the fort and just minimize civilian casualties for, 20 minutes. Real-time strategy is possibly my favorite genre of them all, and every single RTS campaign does this at least once, and I can only think of one game that's done it well, and let me tell you, it's not Halo Wars. What usually happens is you get over the hump and have enough stuff to defend, and then the remaining 14 minutes or whatever is just super boring. Or you do really well and everything looks great, and then you make one mistake 19 minutes in and lose. I'm not saying this is a big glaring issue or anything, it's a pretty minor part of this game, but just stop doing that. The game tells its story with solid cinematics and great music, but it ultimately feels way too short at only 15 missions long. And despite there being multiple playable factions in multiplayer, you only ever get to play as one of them during the whole campaign. The lack of a Covenant campaign may be the single biggest thing holding this game back from a significantly higher ranking. Speaking of the multiplayer, there's multiplayer. First, choose if you're playing as the UNSC or the Covenant. They're asymmetrically balanced, meaning you have different units and tech trees, but they're not crazy different from each other. I'll start with the things that are the same. You have a core base that you start out with, and there's slots around that base to add building tech as well as turrets. Resources are gathered by making a supply building. There's separate buildings for army creation, one for infantry, one for ground vehicles, and one for flying vehicles. The turrets are basically identical. For infantry, you have an anti-personnel specialist, an anti-vehicle specialist, and a middle ground unit between them. For vehicles, you have more or less the same. Now for the differences. The Covenant start with a very powerful hero unit that can get special upgrades over the course of the game to become even better. Plus, there's the ability to teleport the hero unit back to any of your bases, which works well to defend in a pinch. Meanwhile, UNSC players get access to map-wide abilities from their large spaceships. Tech advancement is a little different for the two factions as well. UNSC has to build several reactor buildings in order to keep advancing their technology level, taking up building slots to do so. You can upgrade an existing reactor, but it's very cost prohibitive. The Covenant, however, only needs a singular tech building, but while it costs less resources to upgrade that building compared to upgrading UNSC reactors, building new reactors is still much cheaper. This means, however, that the Covenant can make a lot more use out of their building slots. To offset this, expansion bases for Covenant start with fewer building slots than UNSC bases, but they can quickly be upgraded to increase the amount of slots available. There's other minor differences later in the tech tree of upgrades for units, but most of them fill similar roles, just in slightly different ways, so nothing crazy. In addition to normal go kill your opponent multiplayer, there are other modes with their own twists, but it's still all built on the same premises. All things considered, Halo Wars was set out to make a true RTS on a console, and I think it succeeded in basically every way. The main things holding it back were lack of content, and while I would have liked to see a little more structural variety between the UNSC and Covenant factions, it ultimately still feels different enough for players to carve out their own playstyle over time. If you like Halo and want to try something new, or you're an RTS veteran looking for a refreshing take on a Command and Conquer style RTS, Halo Wars is well worth your time. Just don't expect it to take, a lot of it. Join me tomorrow as I talk about the 259th game on my list, where I relive my childhood sports fantasies.